the church itself. There have been a lot of issues about the church in recent time in Nigeria. The church has been seen as mostly as a clubhouse, whereby everything that is being preached is not just salvation, but about development of the church itself, the structures, building. Everything is about money, it's about private jets, it's about schools. I mean, pastors will have good schools and members will not be able to send their children there. There's no, what can I call it? There's no sense of mercy for the poor people in the church. As a missionary and as a man with a different heart, and a man who believes that God wants the denomination to collapse for his own unique virtues to thrive. What aches you about church? Do you see all this as signs of the end time, or what do you think? Whereby churches are mostly about the daddy, about the mommy, and about the sons. Where you see GOs handing over to their son, or GOs having their son as PA, and everything is just around mesmerizing the people and about money, about flashy things. What's your opinion about that? And does it pain you as a
there are different levels to the question you've asked. Very recently, I granted an interview to a Nigerian newspaper titled "The Rich Lives of Men of God Have Stained the Church," or something like that. And the truth is that this is not how the Nigerian church started. The Nigerian church started with the Catholic and the big Protestant churches. And these were not centered around single owners of the church. Then the Pentecostal movement came, and it was no longer a collegiate management, it was one man. And I think that's where the devil crept into the Nigerian church. Recently, I acquired a book called The Seduction of the Nigerian Church.
That's very, very interesting book.
Very interesting.
I'd like to have a copy.
Yeah, that is how the devil crept into the Nigerian church. And the focus moved from salvation to prosperity. And we need to find ourselves and our way back to salvation. Now, I think also that the government of Nigeria should be careful, just as I have admonished that the men of God and women of God should be very careful. Money should not be the reason we are setting up church. It's the saving of souls. It's so bad now in Nigeria that anyone who mentions to you, "I'm a child of God," should put you on alert. If somebody introduces himself or herself and says, "I'm a pastor," you should be very careful.
Of course.
It has gotten to that stage.
Of course, sir.
In the past, he says, "I'm a pastor," you are more than willing to provide everything you can for his comfort. Now, how do we find ourselves back to that level of trust again as men and women of God in Nigeria? We need to bring the ideals of corporate governance back into the church. The church can no longer be about one man. However, the Nigerian government has to be careful. In England, in America, in Germany, where I have registered my ministry, there is a separate body that registers charity organizations, and churches come under charity organizations because churches are non-for-profit. But when men of God are leading luxuriant lives, you begin to wonder, are these churches companies? Because a man of God is meant to be modest. The more money you have, the more you should be able to do for the people, not for yourself and your immediate family alone. Now, where I say the Nigerian government has to be careful is we still don't get it right.
Okay, sir.
The Corporate Affairs Commission should not be the only authority that registers all concerns. Right now, that's what we have in Nigeria.
Yes,
it's
sir.
not the same in America, it's not the same in England. It's not the same even in the Federal Republic of Germany. The moment CAC is the one that registers all of us, government will want to rule churches, supervise churches, monitor churches like they monitor companies. Now, I always say, let's go back to the master plan of God.
What is the master plan, sir?
Now, in some cases, you see God telling the progenitor of a movement, this is the person you should appoint after you.
Yeah.
Just as Moses got old, before he died, God said, appoint Joshua. I totally believe that any concern that belongs to God, not a human being, it should be God telling you who to appoint. It should not be a filial thing unless the Lord says your son must take over. So you need to be very, very careful. I don't have a son who wants to take over right now, but I don't know what God's plan is. When you set up a church and it's no longer about the people but the steeple, the building, it is no longer about their salvation but the amount of money the church has, you're going to want to defend that money with your blood. I know my wife, my children's children must enjoy this money I have put together. If it was about salvation, you'll not be looking at your son to take over. Unless your son is also going to be about salvation. So let's all go back to the original plan of God.
And that's how we're going to run church, and that's how church is going to be run.
And that's what a church should be.
To be run. What is your perception about the church and education? We are very aware that the education system is bad. But many years ago, the missionary came to Africa, they came to Nigeria in particular, and they created schools, and education was a giveaway. A lot of people have quality education, and I'm sure your own generation were part of those who benefited from missionary education at no cost or a very minimal cost. But today, people of your generation have churches, and those churches establish crusades, nursery and primary schools, secondary schools, universities, and they make people to pay fortune to send their children to school. I mean, the situation whereby a parent have to keep eating garlic before you can pay all the monies for your child, and you have 3 children in that same school, you can't even buy clothes, you can't even take good medicine and all that stuff. And we believe that they now tell us that the education is expensive. But what of the education you people got in your own day? Was it not expensive? So what is the role of the church and education? Do you think the church is supposed to make education very costly for the ordinary people? Since the church itself is a benefactor of consistent financial seed through offerings, through tithes and all the rest. What is it to the issue of the church and the school and the education side? If you are to be in a platform to rectify that area.
Thank you very much. I benefited from the good works of the Methodist and Anglican Church. I finished from Igbobi College, Yaba, which was a combined Methodist Anglican effort. The government in Nigeria was clueless when it took over schools from missionary bodies. After running for a few years and almost ran all those schools aground, St. Finbar's College, here in Lagos, Igbobi College, Methodist Girls High School, so many of them, Holy Child College, CMS Grammar School, they returned them to the missionary bodies again. Now, because of that disconnect, those schools could no longer run the way they ran before the takeover. I remember that when I was in Igbobi College, the school fees was next to nothing. We will go to the bursar's office, get our clearance, go to the bookshop, collect books, collect our uniforms, and there was almost everything, all the way to socks and all of that. And by the time they returned these schools, because the church no longer had the schools as their immediate concerns, the churches had moved to other things. Coming back, those services now cost a premium. The churches were struggling to maintain the standards that had fallen, to improve upon those standards, to get those schools back to the way it used to be. And this again is what has extrapolated to tertiary institutions. We now have private universities that cost a fortune, and I'd like to address that. I'm a man of God, I run a church, I run a ministry, and I can tell you for free. The Bible is clear. that Christians should pay their tithe. But I can tell you this.
Okay, sir.
A church is fortunate if they have 10% of their membership diligently paying their tithe. Most people don't pay their tithe. They just pay something. And you know, tithe is not by coercion. Tithe is meant to be voluntary. So I think it might not be entirely true that the universities that are set up by religious organizations are set up purely on the tithes and the offerings of the members. Unless you have evidence of their finances, you cannot say categorically that the church members are the ones funding the takeoff of those institutions. Now, for the sake of argument, I would also look at the fact that almost everybody that's been criticizing private universities run by religious organizations are the non-members of those churches. Yes. You know?
But the members murmurs. Most of them murmurs.
Well,
but they cannot speak out.
There's a difference between me saying I'm a member of so and so organization. My child cannot go to the university set up by my church, because and I'm the one complaining. Because I don't have any instance of that. Everybody who's been criticizing these religious organizations are outsiders to those organizations. Now, I'm not a member of Covenant University, but let me use that as a benchmark. It is not the most expensive private university owned by a religious organization.
How do you mean, sir?
It is not. I know for a fact.
Okay.
I don't want to mention the other private universities run by religious organizations, but of the lot, it is not the most expensive. Now, imagine that the school fees, very phenomenal, is 800,000, and that's per annum. 800,000, 850,000. That's the highest in Covenant University. I'm not a member of Covenant University. I'm the pastor of Shaddaiville Ministries. But I have 2 children in that university. Now listen to me. I took a decision that the older of the 2 should go and take his A-levels because I wanted to send him to England. As we speak today, as a foreign student in England, I'll be paying minimum £15,000 if he was there in England. So I pay a little less than 850,000 on him. He's about to finish his program in petroleum engineering. Now, if you look at 800 or 850,000, there's a clear difference between 800,000, 850,000 compared to 15,000 pounds. Now, a graduate of that university will rank with the graduate of any university anywhere in the world. I took that decision because, one, it was at a time when a lot of parents I know were complaining about the children they sent abroad lacking morals. So as bad as we think Nigeria is, our children are found to be even more morally upright than a lot of young kids in the Western world. So I said to myself, and I said to my wife, that the rich man does not go and buy death with his own money. Now if we send this young man abroad before his values are totally formed, then he can be derailed. So I said, let's look for a university here. Then I got worried about federal universities and state universities because of their closures. It is the year of matriculation, you don't know the year of graduation. ASU will strike, non-academic staff will strike. Then if your child is a girl, she will keep coming back home with all manner of stories about victimization and sexual harassment. And I said, look, how can I buy peace? So I called up the human resources manager of a leading oil company because my son had made up his mind he was going into the oil industry. And I said, when you're sorting out recruitment, how do you rate Nigerian universities? He said, Covenant #1. Now, I'm not saying this to beat down any other university brand, whether religious, federal, or private in any way. It is what I heard, it's a matter of fact. So once he said that, I called my son and I said, that's where you're going. Daddy, there is so much talk. It's like a glorified secondary school. They don't allow you phones. Now, his parent 5 years will soon be out. The difference is that he's been able to concentrate on his studies. And by the special grace of God, he's going to be graduating at the top of his class. That is a lot more than I can say for government-owned universities. We have wonderful facilitators, lecturers in our government universities, but the system is lax. They are agitating all the time for better welfare. There's distraction for what they do. So back to why we are saying all of this. If a university lecturer with a PhD is earning anything between 400,000 and 500,000, can the university be charging what a federal university is charging the students? If we do not have access to the accounting books of a religious organization, how much do we know it takes to set up their facilities?
That's a very complex one.
But all in all, and then I say to people, do you know what charity structure these religious organizations have for indigent students of members of their denomination whose children are bright enough, they pass JAM, but the parents cannot afford these fees? Do we know if these universities have structures for such people? Maybe they do, is why the same people are not the ones criticizing. Now, for someone like me who's benefited from private education, and I've seen the advantage in a society like ours that don't care whether schools are shut down or not, what I have bought is peace of mind for myself. Now, this university that says expensive, you won't see me wear flashy clothes. I don't drive flashy cars. My investment goes into the education of my children. The secondary school my children went to are more expensive than the university they are in right now. However, this is not to say that we should be reckless. Men of God who have been blessed enough to have religious organizations and educational institutions should find a way for members of their church whose children pass the required JAM score to get into universities. They should find a way of setting up scholarships so that they are happy being members of their churches and the children are getting the right education.